our places there now. The other one was when we welcomed some young children to the Mayor's Parlour, and I brought them up to the chamber by the Mayor's secret staircase. They were so excited, and on the way down, one of them asked me whether Harry Potter uses that staircase. Last Tuesday evening, we held my charity launch, and all three charities spoke really well, particularly the Halo Foundation, the charity that deals with bereavement for young children. And when one of the bereaved mothers spoke, I think a few of us had a lump in our throat. Waitrose of Northwood had given us two £50 John Lewis vouchers, so as well as the normal raffle, we were able to do the heads and tails game, raising extra money for the charities. Please put the 19th of July in your diaries, as we will be holding our first supper quiz on that evening. And if you are free, it would be great if you could join us. As some of you know, being in this position can make you feel quite important. However, children can bring you back down to earth with a bump. So before I finish, I would like to share with you all something my youngest grandson said recently. He was staying with his other grandparents at the time, and recently he had been learning to ride a horse. The conversation went like this. His granddad said, "I hear you're learning to ride, Liam." "Yes, Grandad, I am." "And are you enjoying it?" "Yes, it's great." "So what's your horse's name then?" "It's Flossie." "Oh, so it's a lady horse?" "Yes, that's right." "You know a lady horse is called a mare, don't you?" Liam thought for a moment and then said, "Oh yes, my other grandma is a mare." As they say, out of the mouths of babes. Now, back to the agenda and more serious matters. Item 5, the report of the Democratic Services. Councillor Puddicook, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There is only one recommendation within this report, and that is requesting that Council note the decisions made using urgency procedures since the Council meeting held on the 23rd of February. These are detailed on pages 53 and 255 of the agenda. I move the recommendation.
Is it seconded, please?
Madam Mayor, I second and reserve my right.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? Is that agreed? Thank you. Moving to item 6, questions from members. Councillor Bridges, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Following the tragic incident at Grenfell Tower in Kensington and Chelsea, and the actions of Camden Council to evacuate tower blocks now considered to be a danger to the lives of tenants and leaseholders, would the Leader of the Council please inform the Council of the current situation relating to tower blocks in Hillingdon?
Councillor Puddicook, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for your question, Councillor Bridges. Defining a tower block as a building with more than 6 floors, we have 11 tower blocks, with the tallest being 14 floors high. All blocks have been inspected, and we've sent a return to the DCLG advising that we have no high-rise buildings with the aluminium composite material, ACM, as installed in Grenfell Tower. Our inspections did, however, show that the Council's 4 Bison blocks built in the early 1960s, that's Rabs Mill House, Wellings House, Glenister House and Fitzgerald House, were reclad in the early 1980s with brick cladding containing a polystyrene layer between the brick and the original concrete building. In view of this, we engaged both fire safety specialists and fire protection specialists to look at any potential fire hazard that could arise from this particular cladding and what, if anything, needed to be done. I received their views this morning, and whilst generally positive about the level of fire protection in these blocks, they have indicated that we should review the fire stopping material around windows and vents. In addition, whilst there are horizontal fire breaks on each floor, as a safety precaution, we will be installing vertical fire breaks around the building. As we'd already decided to replace the windows at Rabs Mill, I've agreed that what is referred to as a fire sock is installed around each window as installed, and and that in the other 3 blocks the windows are removed and the new window surrounds inserted. We hope to commence these works in August and have all blocks completed by early December. A letter will be hand-delivered to both tenants and leaseholders on the effects of their blocks tomorrow morning, informing them of the specialist findings and the recommended work. As well as the high-rise blocks, we have 22 smaller sheltered housing blocks, and the cladding and insulation in those blocks is being tested, and we expect the results before the end of the month. The Council has a rolling programme of fire safety inspections, and prior to the Grenfell tragedy, we had commenced a programme to upgrade all fire doors, that's residential and communal doors, from the currently fitted universal fire doors to a new available higher standard fire door. It was decided at the time to commence with the sheltered housing blocks, as they are the more vulnerable tenants, and work on those is actually taking place now and will continue over the summer. The programme for the planned replacement of the fire doors in the high-rise blocks was due to follow the sheltered housing blocks, but has now been brought forward and will take place over the coming months. To avoid lengthy statutory consultations with leaseholders in our high-rise blocks and to put the safety of our residents first, the Council will not charge leaseholders for the installation of their fire doors. We've also recently replaced the fire alarm systems in 6 sheltered housing blocks and commenced replacing lighting in 5 of our high-rise blocks. All sheltered housing and high-rise blocks in the Borough have had premises information blocks fitted. These boxes contain information on building layouts, if appropriate the location of any asbestos in the building, and details of high dependency residents. The Fire Brigade can then assess and retrieve lists of which units contain vulnerable residents and assist in prioritising actions in fire situations. On Monday the 26th of June, Council officers met with London Fire Brigade technical officers and a station officer to review our work plans already underway, as well as our proposed work plans. Council officers confirmed that once test results were available on the types of cladding used on our high-rise blocks, it would be shared with the Fire Brigade. Council officers also offered to undertake joint visits to the blocks to deal with any issues or concerns that the Brigade may have. The Fire Brigade officers welcome the LBH approach and the updates on actions already being taken to maintain the safety of our residents. On the question of the installation of sprinkler systems, the Fire Brigade indicated that they were waiting for government advice regarding retrofitting. However, rather than wait for this, I have authorised the fitting of sprinklers in the communal areas of all high-rise blocks and the commencement of consultation with tenants and leaseholders regarding fitting sprinklers in their homes. Members will have received copies of the letter sent to residents of our tower blocks, as well as the updated advice from the London Fire Brigade issued last week. The letter to residents included detail of a dedicated helpline if they had specific concerns or required further detail. As yet we've received no calls. The advice from the Fire Brigade refers to their stay-put policy, indicating that if a fire starts in the common parts of or in another flat, all residents not directly affected by the fire would be expected to stay put and remain in their flats unless directed to leave by the Fire and Rescue Service. I referred earlier to our programme of replacing fire alarms in supported housing blocks. However, the advice on fire safety in purpose-built blocks of flats provided by the local government group in 2011 and followed by most councils, including Hillingdon, is that where the stay-put policy is recommended, it states, and I quote, "In general needs blocks designed to support a stay-put policy, it is unnecessary and undesirable for a fire alarm to be provided. A communal fire detection system would inevitably lead to a proliferation of false alarms. This will impose a burden on fire and rescue services and lead to residents ignoring warnings of genuine fires. We will, of course, adhere to any new guidance on fire alarms, should any be forthcoming." Madam Mayor, as a council, we have been and continue to do all that we practically can to keep our residents safe from the risk of major fire. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the officers of this council, not only for the work they've done over the past 3 weeks, but for what is done on a regular and routine basis. Prior to the tragedy at Grenfell Tower, we had not received any concerns from residents or members about fire safety in our high-rise blocks. However, whilst we are confident that we are managing the risk as best we cannot afford to be and will not be complacent.
Thank you, Councillor Puddyford. Councillor Bridges, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, indeed I do, Madam Mayor. Would the Leader of the Council agree with the recent statement made by John MacDonald, Member of Parliament, that those who died in the Grenfell Tower tragedy were murdered by political decisions that were taken over recent decades?
Well, what he actually said was those families, those individuals, 79 so far, there will be more, were murdered by political decisions that were taken over recent decades. Whilst 45 councils of all political colours, but it happens mainly Labour councils across the country, have high-rise buildings with the same cladding as Grenfell Tower, there is as yet no detail from those councils of why the decision was made to use that cladding. Media attention is obviously concentrated on Kensington and Chelsea and Camden, and again there will in due course be a report published containing detail of what happened at Grenfell Tower, and we will get further information on the apparent failure of Camden to install fire doors to fit plastic gas pipes and use ACM cladding. Any sensible person would await more detailed facts before apportioning blame, let alone making such outrageous accusations. In the case of Camden Council, I cannot recall who the Labour leader of the council was in 2004 when planning permission was agreed to refurbish Chalcott's estate blocks, and we did have a Labour government with Tony Blair as Prime Minister. But I'm positive that Camden Council would not have knowingly put people's lives at risk any more than councils in Kensington and Chelsea or the other 43 councils that installed ACM cladding. The dictionary definition of murder is to kill unlawfully and with premeditation. Madam Mayor, regardless of their political allegiance, I find it impossible to believe that over the past 20, 30, 40 years, local councillors across this country and members of Parliament have made premeditated decisions to kill or harm their residents. In my years as leader of this council, I've refrained from commenting on the abilities of other politicians. But whilst this unfortunate incident could charitably be viewed as rabble-rousing or playing to the gallery, it is incumbent on those in public office to act responsibly and sensibly as they can. If this is John McDonnell being responsible and sensible, it is frightening to think of him in a position of authority in government.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll now move on to item 7. We have a motion from Councillor Edgington, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm hopeful that everybody in this chamber will accept this motion. It's intended to just emphasise the importance of our scrutiny and policy and overview committees, that they are an important part of the way in which the Council is held to account. It also allows recommendations to be made, support given for good, and highlighting poor practices. There have been some comments made in committees and by officers suggesting that decisions as to the matters to be discussed by committees may be looked at, or rather more, by members of the Cabinet. It is crucial that independence has to be seen to happen and to be actually happening. Otherwise, there's a clear risk that important areas of operation are not being reviewed. If Cabinet members have views on the subjects to be reviewed, then it's quite reasonable for them to attend the committees to explain their views. As with school governing bodies, we should treat the committees as critical friends. They need to be rigorous but fair in dealing with the Council. They need to be adequately resourced, and the members need to be fully trained in their task. In this case, we need to recall that there's been no member training, as far as I can recall, other than for statutory duties such as planning and licensing, since 2015. And training in 2014 and 15 has been more information about the Council's activities rather than seeking to improve the abilities of committee members or to raise the quality of the inquiries made. And with recent events, we need to understand quite how important it is for our committees to be seen to operate both efficiently and to be inquisitive. And so I believe, Madam Mayor, that the Council should accept the motion as I propose. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that motion seconded, please? Councillor Curley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The role of overview and scrutiny is a vitally important one in the modernised system of local government. It provides the checks and balances required to hold the executive to account and also to contribute to better decision making by utilising the knowledge, experience and opinions of all the non-executive members of the Council, regardless of political party. When I was first elected in 2002, one of the tragic news stories of the time was the death of Victoria Colombier. and Lord Laming presided over the public inquiry into her death. One of the many quotes from his report that really brought home to me the responsibility that elected members have is this one. He said, elected councillors and senior officers must ensure that they are kept fully informed about the delivery of services to the populations that they serve. And they must not accept at face value what they are told. The context of this quote relates to elected councillors and senior officers, but it also equally applies to the council's executive and non-executive members. In most cases, the Policy Overview Committees undertake a series of reviews and investigations into various policy areas and the delivery of services to the borough. It is vital that these committees act independently of the executive and question various decisions that are made that can then be presented to the Cabinet as recommendations for them to consider. The Executive Scrutiny Committee in particular should hold the leader and his Cabinet to account for their decisions and not take things at face value. Scrutiny can also be a way of improving decisions and resolving concerns that may or may not have been considered when the original decision was made. I find it most unhealthy for local democracy and for general democratic accountability that for the last 10 years nothing that our Cabinet has decided has been the subject of a call-in. This is not something to be proud of, and I would say it's symptomatic of a situation where scrutiny, challenge and debate are curtailed and the decisions of the executive are rubber-stamped at face value. Madam Mayor, I second this motion in the hope that the Council will recognise the importance of democratic accountability and the importance of having a strong and, dare I say, stable overview and scrutiny function that is independent of the executive and provides the checks and balances needed for the healthy governance of our borough and the services we provide to the residents.
Thank you, Councillor Cohen. Councillor Cawthorne.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm afraid we oppose the motion, and I will come on to explain why, but essentially our view on this is very clear. This motion, in our view, misses the point of the effective functioning of the Policy and Overview Committee system alongside the executive under our Constitution, and betrays, I think, a lack of understanding of how they work in serving the residents of Hillingdon. Firstly, I must say that the independence of committees actually should go without saying. Completely agree with that. To that extent, I agree with Councillor Eggington. I have myself on many occasions in this chamber spoken of the importance of committed independence and praised their invaluable contribution towards policy formulation and in framing recommendations, which almost invariably are accepted by Cabinet and implemented in full. At the same time, though, I think there is without doubt a need for constructive engagement between the executive and the POCs to help support the development of policy and service provision. It will sometimes be the case that changes to legislation, for example, will render it timely to undertake a review to assist officers, and the Housing and Planning Act and the new provisions dealing with the private rented sector within my own portfolio are a good recent example of this. Equally, it may be that there is a programme of work already in the pipeline which can help inform thinking about the timing and nature of prospective reviews. And of course, we should not forget that officer time is a finite resource, and there is a need to make sure that this is harnessed to best effect. Reviews take up significant amounts of officer time, and it is crucial, therefore, that this resource is deployed in a way which best supports the efficient conduct of reviews and formulation of policy recommendations. And additionally, I go beyond the requirements sometimes of the Constitution, and I meet with members, including some opposition members, to pick up on areas of concern with officers. Madam Mayor, none of what I've described amounts to a veto. We have some first-class colleagues on both sides of this chamber who fully understand the context which I have set out and have shown they are more than capable of exercising their own professional judgment against this background. The idea that there should be some kind of Trappist vow of silence between us, existing in silos and never the twain shall meet, would be utterly self-defeating. It simply wouldn't work, and ultimately we would be letting down the people of this borough who we were all elected to serve. Madam Mayor, the notion that the independence of the POCs is under threat is misguided and patently absurd. We oppose the motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Simmons, please.
Well, Madam Mayor, like my colleague Councillor Cawthon, I oppose this motion. And there are three things that I'd like to say about it. The first is a general observation in response to some of the points raised by Councillor Edgington. And the second two items are slightly more of a political nature. To pick up the point about training and development, we all walk through the door of the council as newly elected members, equal in our status. We sign the book presented by the Head of Democratic Services, and we are in due course appointed to take on different roles and responsibilities. And it is absolutely right that the way that those are divided is focused on how we serve the interests of our residents most effectively. An executive system allows swift and efficient decision making, and overview and scrutiny ensures effective oversight by members of the policies of this authority. And I can see a number of members of this council who've gone on the training programmes, the development opportunities offered by the Local Government Association, the Centre for Public Scrutiny that are out there, who've brought that expertise back. And I think of my own service area, Councillor Riley, and what he's brought to corporate parenting, the improvement and the focus in the questions that are being asked, the focus on the detail, and the contribution that that makes to us as an executive and to me as a cabinet member making the right decisions is enormous. So being able to have a two-way dialogue is absolutely vital. And we shouldn't forget some of the reasons why this system was introduced. And that really brings me on to the 2 points of a slightly more political nature. The first reference, I think, to Lord Laming, because before Lord Laming was Lord Laming, he was a very senior inspector, social services inspector at the SSI, and made particular criticism when he was the inspector for Hillingdon of a number of members of this council, some of whom still sit in this chamber, who at the time were part of the Social Services Committee, because they were on a committee, they were at the meetings, they thought they were scrutinising, but they did not know what was going on. And he took that concern and said, actually, we need to think about a better and more effective way of doing it. I think those members need to reflect on whether this is a motion they can support, given that history. But finally, I think we need to consider the role of executive scrutiny, the direct oversight to the decisions that we take. That, for many years, was something which we asked the Leader of the Opposition or the Opposition to undertake. You chose not to undertake that responsibility because you could not even manage to chair and to oversee that single task. So to be here tonight saying that that has somehow created a system when it has been your decision to step away from it is frankly ridiculous.
Thank you. Councillor Riley?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Egerton, for this motion, which gives me an opportunity to perhaps shed some light onto what is clearly causing some confusion on the Labour benches. This candy floss of a motion, superficially attractive but melts away to nothing when subjected to oral scrutiny, is, I'm afraid to say, misconceived and ill thought out. This council is arranged on a model of civic mayor, leader and cabinet with 4 POCs and 2 scrutiny committees. The committee's work is selected by the chairman and the committee, but the gathering of ideas for that work must most usefully be from a variety of sources. It is, in my judgment, imperative that one of those sources is the cabinet member whose portfolio most closely touches on the subject matter in hand, or even that a cabinet member might usefully be used as a conduit of ideas for topics of work to be considered. A chairman will also consult with other members, officers and anyone else who might make a positive contribution. It's not a question of veto or control or anything like it, but it is a useful route of choice for that topic. Indeed, many would think it was only wise that such a course should be undertaken. Subjects that are of use and of interest to cabinet members, including the leader, are fruitfully explored, given detailed consideration and then recommended on. They are not the only ones, but a part of the overall pot from which topics are chosen. Madam Mayor Kipling had his 6 honest serving men. Well, I've only got 4. Inclusion, cooperation, consultation and engagement. And in this area, they are well applied. It is equally the case that if such a good relationship is developed, then when the committee in question wants to review something with a radical twist, it is far more likely to be well received by Cabinet. There have been no end of excellent reports recently and down the years generated by our committees. some critical of or challenging to the Executive, but because the Cabinet has become used to such high-quality reports, recommendations and other innovations in the Committee's work, all, in my judgment, have been well received. Madam Mayor, this motion shows a lack of understanding of how the committee system works. I oppose it and I ask the Chamber to reject it.
Thank you. Councillor Edgington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think it all comes back really to independence. I'm not saying that topics could not be suggested by Cabinet or by other individuals, maybe not members of the Policy and Overview Committees. But the importance is that the final decision is made by the committee without, as I have previously said or mentioned, a possible veto from a Cabinet member. I think that's what's crucial. Constructive cooperation makes a lot of sense. Two-way dialogue makes a lot of sense. But in order for this to be a rigorous, independent inquiry system holding the Executive to account, there has to be independence both of thought and also of choice of the topics. And sometimes, I'm not saying always, but sometimes I don't think that's happened. I've certainly heard from some officers that effectively there was a veto on certain things which were going to be discussed by Policy and Overview Committee. I don't think there's anything in this motion which should upset any part of this chamber, but clearly it does rile some people. So, Madam Mayor, I still propose this motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We now take a vote on the motion. Those for? Those against? I'm afraid the motion is lost. Moving on now to item 7.2, motion from Councillor Burrows, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of Council, I'm sure, will be very aware of the challenges facing our residents when travelling through and around our towns and local communities. As a Council, although we welcome the arrival of the Elizabeth line in the south of the borough, the fact remains that we are poorly served by public transport and rely heavily upon private means to travel. The Greater London Authority, however, wants to significantly limit the amount of car parking that is provided with new developments. This could be as little as 0.25 parking spaces per residential unit, compared to Hillingdon's standard of 1 car parking space per home and higher for larger dwellings. In other parts of London, this can work because connectivity is better, but for much of Hillingdon, where trip lengths are longer and the bus network less comprehensive, the private car is the only real form of genuine travel choice for our residents. The Mayor of London should recognise that Hillingdon, although like a previous Labour Mayor, I doubt he knows where Hillingdon is different from the rest of London. Adequate levels of car parking need to be provided for new developments, as there is simply no other way of getting around, especially late at night. The currently adopted and the emerging local plan policies set out the standards we consider being appropriate to provide the right amount of parking within new developments. This approach ensures those living in the new homes can park conveniently without creating additional on-street parking demand to the detriment of others. I believe that the balance has been carefully achieved between the demand for parking and the consequences for us all if not provided. But it is not just car parking provision in residential developments that the Council needs to protect, as some people working in Hillingdon commute in from neighbouring towns. New businesses want to be able to offer their employees and clients somewhere to park. If a new business is unable to provide the amount of car parking that is needed, then the business may locate elsewhere and Hillingdon residents could be denied employment opportunities. Taking all of this into account, Madam Mayor, I would invite all councillors from both sides of this chamber to endorse this motion and instruct the Chief Executive to write to the Mayor for London expressing our resolve to maintain a parking standard right for Hillingdon and right for its residents. I so move the motion, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Burrows. Are there any speakers? Seconder. I beg your pardon. Councillor Mills, sorry.
Madam Mayor, I second the motion and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Curling.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On this side of the chamber, we wholeheartedly agree with the motion. Those of us who have sat on planning committees have always fought for maximum parking, and I take the view taking away car parking spaces does not reduce cars. All it does is means that cars have got less places to park and cause more chaos. So we agree.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes. Councillor Crowe, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm slightly taken aback by the last contribution. I also stand to support the motion, but with some trepidation, not all of it mine. When I first became a councillor, I was astonished at the extent to which we were supposed to restrict parking, even to limit. We were trying to limit the number of journeys, reduce the number of journeys that were taken. And I realised that one of the factors underlying some of English local government is finding out what people want to do and stopping them. It extended to bottle feeding, teenage pregnancy. I never understood what the doings of a 19-year-old married woman had got to do with me. Councillor Burrows is right, and so is Councillor Curling, funnily enough. The thing won't work. People don't want to cycle to work in January and February, whatever the messianic cyclists of Sustrans wish them to do and tell them to do. The problem is that they will still have cars. We will finish up giving them exclusive rights to the roads to park on. Then they'll have somewhere to park, but they'll have nowhere to go because when they get there, they'll have nowhere to park. You get the situation which exists in many cases of additional pollution because they're driving round and round looking for somewhere to park. I believe the record is held by Freiburg in Germany. 74% of the vehicles were going around looking for somewhere to park. We'll be like the Chinese. They send their mother and father out into the street to get a parking space and hold it for them. They just pay the fines. Mind, they get a discount if they pay in cash and don't ask for a receipt. The restrictions will damage economic development, commerce, social activity. They will be an imposition and they will be resented. And for that reason, I support this motion.
Thank you for that. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. My group does support this motion, and councillor colleagues will have heard me, I think, on more than one occasion speak about my views on parking restrictions imposed on Hillingdon, which I find unintelligible. We are an outer London borough. We have an interface with green bus routes and country services and provision. We are not an inner London borough. We do not have the services that inner London boroughs have in terms of public transport, and it's therefore totally unreasonable to expect our residents, businesses, people, attending other people, nursing, providing services to people who are sick and ill, to use the limited public transport services that we have. It simply slows everything down. Also, if you look at a map, we are comparable in terms of economic development with Watford and Slough. They have much higher parking standards. And as Councillor Burrows referred to in his speech, yes, this is very attractive to a lot of developers and businesses. They don't want to have their staff, or residents don't want their families to be wasting time looking for car parking spaces. It certainly makes things run more smoothly for everyone if we can have a right amount of parking here. I know that they did introduce very onerous standards in the London plan, and subsequently those standards we were allowed to have the saved UDP policies on parking reintroduced into Hillingdon, which gave us a little more parking. So I do hope that the administration will make very, very vigorous comments about this and point out that Hillingdon's position is unique in many ways, and the reasons for it. We have Heathrow, there's a lot of shift working there. You cannot expect people to go to shift work unless they go by car. And particularly if people who live just over the border want to work here or provide services here, they can't do that by the limited public transport that's available. So I definitely support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Mills.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We are extremely grateful for the joint approach that we're able to take to this one from Councillor Curling, and Councillor Duncan's comments are absolutely spot on, particularly regard to the proximity of us with our regional boundary and changes in parking policy and the impacts that that had. However, the reality is that Councillor Curling has only done half the job, I'm afraid, because what you now have to do, whilst we as administration will be very vigorously defending the existing policies we have, I would suggest that you could have words through your political channels with the Mayor of London, who, because of his sudden realisation that he's going to fail abysmally to meet his housing target, which he set when he stood for election, is now putting pressure on to get developments in the outer boroughs with much reduced parking. So I would hope you'll be able to use your channels to explain, in the words of Councillor Duncan, why Hillingdon is a special case. And you, as a ward councillor in your area, will particularly want to emphasise that, because with the Nestles development coming forward, you as ward councillors in Townfield, Botwell and spreading into Pinkwell are about to face an absolute disaster if that development goes ahead as planned with so little parking spaces. That's assuming you get re-elected next year, but we might give you that one. For those wards only. But it is something that we need to work united together to make sure that the Mayor does understand that Hillingdon is special. And of course, we have very good examples that Hillingdon in the past has been able to get into the ear of the Mayor of London and explain the Hillingdon case. So you have a good act to follow. I hope that you can follow it up, but rest assured, we through the official channels will be making the case very strongly that parking standards must not be diluted in Hillingdon.
Thank you. Councillor Burrows, did you want to come back?
Madam Mayor, I don't think there's much more for me to say. I think my motion's going to go through very well this evening, based on everything everybody has said. So straight to the vote. Thank you.
We'll now take a vote on the motion 7-2 from Councillor Burrows. All those for? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Moving on to 7-3, motion from Councillor Nelson, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When will this council come to terms with the cuts that they are doing across the board? The residents that live on our estates are not getting the services they needed. Our residents living on our estates are running into despair. The internal buildings are not clean, wherefore we used to have the caretakers to clean the estates. The stairways are in a terrible state. Muck build up on the stairways. The windows and the doors are either smeared with vomit or sputum, lots of cobwebs all around the windows, in the stairways, and I do my best creating MEs, and the response from the council is negative. Why is this response negative? Because there is nobody there to do the work that is required to be done, because there is no caretakers. It's now over a year and a half since an inspection has been carried out on the Glebe estate, even though an inspection has been requested. This has given rise to fire hazard, as residents are leaving buggies, rubbish, and household items along the passageway and stairways that should be kept clear when inspections was done and hazards removed. At least the residents were notified and action would be taken. Now, whenever a complaint is made, all that is done is just a minimal of work being done to address the issue. Also, some residents have asked me, what will be done to regulate the fire drill? What will be done to regulate fire drills? What will be done for compulsory fire safety induction to residents? And when will PAT testing of all electrical appliances that is in flats be tested by the council? Can this council please explain to our residents why these services are not being provided? Some residents even stated that it is because we are poor, disabled, and some of us are single, unemployed, or low-income family, that we are being cast out like animals. I'm just reading what the residents is saying to us. Who cares about us? Who cares how we live? We are the forgotten residents that this council treats as worse than animals. The forgotten residents that don't care about us this side of the borough. This is what our residents are saying to us. This is what we have to listen to all the time. Can we please invest in our estates and treat our people like human beings? Treat our residents like human beings and not like a herd of cattle. This is what is being said to us. So I'm reporting what is being said to us, because we are the one at the forefront who is receiving this sort of information from the residents. I'm not going to cover it with icing cake. I'm just going to say it as it is. This council motto is to put our residents first. Are you really putting our residents first? Really? Will the cuts that are happening, with the response we are getting, and all this time you get a response that is not even acceptable, because we know that there's only so much the staff can do, because we don't have enough staff to do the work. So I urge you to put the residents first. Thank you.
Thank you. The motion is seconded.
I second
Councillor.
the motion and reserve my right.
Councillor Cawthorne, please.
Madam Mayor, I normally like to debate in measured and moderate language, and I'll try and do that. Although I have to say, I think Councillor Nelson has made some really outrageous remarks and some really outrageous slurs in terms of how we on this side seek to prioritise. We are an administration that puts our residents first, and it's outrageous to make assertions of the sort she's making here. Madam Mayor, we began this evening with a Labour motion to Council stressing the importance of the independence of POCs, and yet now we have another one which seems to contradict this, and it seems to want to direct a POC not only to look at a particular topic, but also, it seems to me, to almost predetermine the outcome in terms of reinstating dedicated caretakers. Never mind the carefully assembled evidence-based decision-making processes which we see from our POCs and which they do so well. We are being asked to bypass this evening. It's been spoken about earlier that there is a need for development, and I think the Labour group really is all over the place over this question of the role of the POC. I think there is indeed a development need there. Let's come to caretaking, since you raised the topic. It is some time now since this was part of my portfolio responsibilities, and I am well aware it has, yes, presented some challenges over the years without a doubt. We do in fact still have dedicated personnel at a small number of sites with mobile support elsewhere. The current arrangements date back to March 2016. Not dissimilar, in fact, to the arrangements that exist in Ealing and Hounslow. I'm not sure what cuts are going on there, but it's very much a similar arrangement. Some years ago, we moved from what we call an input-based specification, setting out certain tasks which needed to be carried out on a given number of occasions, to an outputs-based specification, setting out an overall standard to maintain, enabling some flexibility to tailor the deployment of caretaking services as the needs of a location may dictate. I think it's also important here, Madam Mayor, that we don't mix up job roles, not least for reasons of safety. For specific works, it's essential that we bring in contractors with the requisite skill sets, and the need for this is something which is surely underlined by recent tragic events elsewhere. Now, I can tell you that recommendations from a recent business improvement delivery review are being implemented with increased management focus for monitoring and resident communication. The review also draws in cross-team working with the street cleansing team to provide additional support as required. This new approach will include a review of current operations and service standards to meet local requirements, and any new operational processes will be implemented by the end of August. If there are any concerns, then they should be raised direct with the contact centre or the tenancy services team. To conclude, Madam Mayor, it really is not for us to direct policy and overview committees, as we've said earlier. What really does surprise me is that I'm reliably informed that there has been no attempt by Labour Party members to bring this forward as a review item.
Thank you.
I suggest they would be better off raising it with a Cabinet member directly. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Hensley.
Madam Mayor, I'm a little bit worried what has just been said by Councillor Nelson. She made reference to a PAT test. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Nelson, but the use of a PAT test is to make sure that any electrical equipment does not go to ground. And it's normally for an employer to make sure that electrical equipment is correct and it's signed off in a register to show that that piece of equipment is safe to use. May I ask you, Councillor Nelson, does your electric kettle have a PAT test? Does your television have a PAT test? No, because you're a private owner, and it does not apply to private property in a private dwelling. So I think, Councillor Nelson, you have slightly confused using that term in the chamber tonight to put a slur. I think it's totally incorrect.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? No. Councillor Allen.
Madam Mayor, over the years I have raised many issues with the Council regarding Townfield Tower blocks on behalf of the residents, more so since they took the dedicated caretakers away, who were much valued, and replaced them with a cleaning team. Had they been in situ, I would have not felt the need some time ago to regularly raise the fact that some tower blocks had only one lift working and one had no lifts working. Indeed, the one I'm talking about also had no water, no electric, and the fire vents wouldn't close. And on one Friday evening, I had to search around the council to find any officer who could actually go down and talk to the residents and find out what was going on. Then, as I say, I had to again get another officer to try and find some water for the residents. And bearing in mind those tower blocks are quite high, we had pregnant mums up there, we had an elderly lady up there, and yet they had nothing, and nobody from this council came. Had there been a caretaker on site, as there had been previously, this issue would have been dealt with. And I wouldn't have had to search round, and please don't keep nodding your head, Councillor O'Brien, going, oh, or shaking, nodding, as if you don't believe it. It's fact. I've got the emails to prove it, and the officers know this is true as well.
Yes, sorry, Councillor Allen, please don't talk across.
No, well,
in
can
the
you,
middle. No, sorry.
please ask someone to have a bit of restraint in their head nodding. or wagging or whatever it was. Right, here we go. Those caretakers are dedicated. They know the residents. They know the old, the young, who can do what, who's capable of what. They used to do inspections, and we used to have regular inspections with officers. Well, of course, now we haven't got a dedicated housing officer in the area now. I think we got one for the whole of Hayes. So the inspections have gone. Now, those caretakers gave comfort not only to the residents, but they acted as the eyes and the ears of this council, police, fire services, because when something happened, they were the first point of call. So today I heard a bit of deja vu. I heard, the council 2 weeks ago started putting in dedicated teams again. And I thought,
10
hold
seconds.
up. I thought, is there a gremlin in looking at my emails? From the recent tragedy at Grenfell Towers, sadly, lessons have to be learned. And one
Councillor
of them
Ann,
is...
can you wind up, please?
Yeah,
Thank
I will.
you.
One of them is that residents must be listened to. I'm supporting this motion tonight because it's the right thing to do. It's truly putting residents first. And I don't expect a clap from you.
Please, Councillor Allen.
Thank you very much.
Down. Thank you. Councillor Nelson, would you like to come back?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I know it sounds outrageous, but I'm afraid I have to say it as the residents say to me. I'm not going to cake it over. I'm just going to put it as it is, because that's what we experience every time we go to visit the residents when they call us. And the place is in a state. Yes, we used to have caretakers before. We used to have regular inspections before. None of it happened. We request to have an inspection and still nothing has happened. So let's face reality. This is what our residents are experiencing. And I will come here and speak as they say it. I'm not going to cover it over. I'm not going to paint it over. I'm going to say it as it is. And it may not be nice and it may not settle in some of people's minds and goals, but that's how it is. And I will say it as it is. In regards to the contractors, we were told there were going to be contractors. You go in and you inspect and you look at the place. You said, where are the contractors? There's nobody there. And you need to probably take a look. Go around to
Councillor
some
Nelson,
of those,
can
those
you not
residents.
talk across the chamber?
Sorry.
Thank you.
I apologize. I apologize, Madam Mayor. But maybe some of the cabinet member would like to go and visit. Come with us and visit the residents and see what is happening. And just see for yourself. It's not something we're making up. This is what's happening. So, yes. And in regards to... And this was made aware to the leader of the council as well, because residents do write to them. Residents do send in a complaint, and they don't get a response. And in regards to Councillor Hensley, in regards to the PAT test, I do understand. I do understand about that, but this is a question since the fire residents are asking what is going to happen. Are they going to test us are they going to give us fire drills? Are they going to give us fire tests? And are they going to test our unit? This is what's being asked. So I'm reporting what is being asked. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you. We now vote on the motion. All those for? All those against? Motion is lost. We now come to item 7.4, motion from Councillor Morse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My first point must be, in 1979, 865 people in the UK died from fires in dwellings. Last year, it was down to 229. So, protection processes have actually worked. In England, around 10% of the population live in high-rise flats, yet 25% of dwelling fires occur in these flats, which accounts for 23% of all fire deaths. Guidance under the building regulations now calls for blocks of flats over 30 metres in height to be fitted with sprinklers in the flats. Regrettably, this regulation is not compulsory for older buildings. In recent years, a number of fires have raised questions about this policy. In February 2013, Keith Wiseman, the coroner for a fire in Shirley Town, Southampton, recommended that sprinklers be fitted to all buildings higher than 30 metres after 2 firemen died, and 2 other firemen barely escaped in that fire. The following month, Judge Francis Kirkham, the coroner at the inquest in 6 deaths that occurred at the Lacarnell House in Camberwell, made a secret recommendation to Mr Pickles. Later in 2013, a parliamentary all-party committee strongly recommended adding into the building regulations the requirement for sprinklers to be mandatory. Sprinklers are to fire suppression what the safety belt is to car transport. Sprinklers are far less damaging and more efficient than the application of fire hoses to the damage to infrastructure, so that damage to infrastructure is reduced, and that is why most insurance companies support sprinkler systems. It took several deaths from high-rise fires in the 1980s to mandate sprinkler retrofitting in the US, where they are now universal. In the UK Building Regulations Act 2010 did not help by failing to specify that the content of external cladding should be fire resistant. It only specified the outer surface. In recent years, the number of fires has persistently remained at over 31,000 per year annually, and we have been averaging over 200 deaths per year. The object of this motion is to put in place policies that in time will assure our residents that in Hillingdon we are aiming at the best safety standards for people living in high-rise flats and for the protection of our schools. In our schools we should aim to contain damage to one room as a result of a fire incident. The destruction of a school will bring incredible disruption to a significant number of children's education. So the policy outlined by this motion seeks to proactively save lives and protect vital assets that are costly to replace. I recommend this motion to Council.
Thank you, Councillor Morse. Councillor Curling, who's seconding.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The fire spread unexpectedly fast, both laterally and vertically, trapping people in their homes with the exterior cladding panels burning through in just 4.5 minutes. That sentence is taken from the inquest into the Lacarnell House fire in July 2009, but could easily be mistaken for a report in what happened recently at Grenfell Tower. In fact, there's a catalogue of similar incidents in various tower blocks over the last 10 years or so, although problems with tower blocks are something that we've seen ever since they were built, whether it's been the gas explosion at Ronan Point in 1968 or the fire at Grenfell Tower in 2017. Madam Mayor, the real problem seems to be that when lessons are learned from these disasters, action hasn't always been forthcoming, and the victims of these disasters have not been listened to. Whether that's been for political reasons, financial reasons, or any other reason, the fire at Grenfell and the abysmal initial response from the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea has brought matters to a head, and rightfully people are asking the authorities why they haven't acted on the lessons learned from the history of similar disasters. Regardless of political colour, Hillingdon has always had a good response to its residents when there's been a local disaster. Perhaps having Heathrow Airport in our borough concentrates our minds more than other councils, but of course more can always be done and nothing is ever perfect, and we should not be complacent about such matters but continue to be aware of what could happen and take appropriate action to prevent it. With issues such as this, things move rather rapidly, so we are happy to agree the amended motion, or the amendment as a friendly amendment to the motion, in the knowledge that sprinkler systems are to be fitted to the communal areas of the borough's tower blocks, with residents being consulted about the installation in their individual flats. With 6 tower blocks in Townfield Ward, this is a topic of huge concern for many residents that the 3 Townfield Ward councillors are proud to represent. Madam Mayor, the remainder of my speech goes on about school buildings, but that's covered by the amended motion referring to other council buildings. So, Madam Mayor, I therefore second this motion.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Puddyford.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the amendment as shown on the order paper, which I'm glad will be accepted as a friendly amendment, to elaborate on the points raised in Councillor Morse's motion and provide detail of what is actually happening. Whilst I do appreciate and accept as a political difference between us that the opposition do not like the strong leader and cabinet model of administration in local government, there are occasions, and this is one of them, when we can get on and do something that we all agree is necessary rather than await a committee decision. I cover the actions that are being taken in my answer to the question from Councillor Bridges earlier, but as we already had commenced our fire door replacement programme and had quotes for further work, we were able to expand on those to secure enough stock to complete our planned programme. As regards installing sprinklers, yes, we could wait for the next Cabinet meeting or get on with it now. As with all decisions of this nature that I do make, a full report will go to Cabinet as soon as possible. Madam Mayor, this is not the time for political differences, and I'm pleased to receive the Labour response tonight. Councils up and down the country are reviewing their fire precautions, and I'm sure they will take whatever measures are necessary, as we would in Hillingdon.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons is seconding.
Madam Mayor, I'm very happy to second the amendment, like the leader, and delighted that the Labour group accepts it as friendly. Just a word around schools. Clearly, school buildings are in a slightly different situation compared to residential tower blocks, in that clearly the occupants of the buildings will be awake when they are there, so you don't have quite the same risk that you have in a residential building that's occupied overnight, where people may not be aware of a fire that's taking place in the building. And all of our schools are required, whether they are academies, preschools or maintained local authority schools, to have up-to-date fire evacuation procedures which they practice regularly, which includes making sure that they can evacuate all of the children from the site to a place of safety. And I know, having visited a number of schools recently, clearly the consequences of the Grenfell Tower fire are encouraging governors, head teachers to think a lot more about this. And it's quite striking, almost the first thing I've been seeing as I walk through the door is the updated reviewed fire evacuation plan, which has been drawn up very recently. But that, I think, gives us some degree of assurance, and I would say it's a regret, but in a sense useful, that there was a spate of notifications, hoax notifications, of alleged explosive devices in schools a few months back, which has resulted in a lot of our schools having tested in difficult circumstances their ability to evacuate their school premises quickly and safely. So we are in a situation where not only do we have a plan sitting in a file, we also have relatively recent experience amongst our schools of putting those plans into action in a live situation and checking that they are actually working effectively. So I think that gives us some degree of assurance when it comes to the safety. When it comes to buildings themselves, clearly the thing that we've seen with schools in the past, there have been a number of total loss of school buildings due to overnight arson attacks, not in Hillingdon, but in other parts of the country. And there's been a lot of debate about whether sprinklers are the appropriate solution to that. It is something which we need to review carefully. Clearly, the disadvantage of sprinklers in a school is that it destroys everything that's in the school building. So if there's a small fire, potentially the school itself becomes unusable, although the building can subsequently be repaired. So we need to make sure that in the nature of different types of buildings that we have, some of which are more or less combustible, which are from different periods, some of which have been extended, some of which haven't, that we have the appropriate fire safety systems, which include sprinklers, misting systems and a variety of other measures to ensure that those buildings themselves are safe and fit for purpose. And I can absolutely commit that the Council is undertaking that work as we speak.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Bianco.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, much has been said about what has been done and should be done, and what the Council is going to be doing over the forthcoming period. And as my colleagues, and indeed people on both sides have said, it's not something we can be complacent about, and it's something we shall all worry about until we know we've got our buildings into the best possible state. Having said that, of course, we're only human, and humans make mistakes, and errors will happen, and unfortunately there will be fires in the future, hopefully not here, and hopefully people won't die. But hopefully we'll learn mistakes. And it seems obvious to me that the people across the country, the councils across the country who have have had the misfortune to have this cladding on their buildings, I don't think any of them will have done it deliberately. I don't think any of them will have said, let's save 50 grand and put this cladding on instead of another one. They'll have taken advice. They'll have understood that building regs are met and other conditions are accepted, and they would have gone ahead on the advice of advisors and officers and all the rest of it. So probably, if there is an error, then it lays with inappropriate or inadequate building regs, and no doubt they will be revised as time goes forward and we will adjust. There are issues, of course, around around many of the things we're proposing. We're going to we're going to give all high-rise tenants smoke alarms over the next few days, and we hope they will take them. Bizarrely, we suspect that we will have trouble giving them to some of them, despite the fact that they'll be free and that we'll install them for them. A council officer was telling me only today that the frequency with which we have to take tenants to court, not high-rise tenants, other tenants to court to gain access to their property to service their boilers, and this is true. Every year we take a number of tenants to court because they won't let us in to service their boilers to make life safe for them. You know, there are issues here. But and hopefully when we install sprinklers, it won't become the entertainment factor for the youths of the borough to put their lighter under each sprinkler head once a week to set them all up. So there are, problems that we'll have to encounter. One thing I did want to touch on is that this is a two-way street. The council doesn't put rubbish in stairways and on landings. The council doesn't block doorways up with prams and the like. Residents do. And if I can send a message through the other side to these residents, we both have a responsibility. The council will do their bit, but residents need to do their bit. I know if I lived on the 17th floor of a block of flats now, I'd be right on to any of my neighbours that was leaving junk in a place that could cause danger or disruption in the future. I'm
10
aware.
seconds, Councillor
And so I really do say this is a two-way street. We have both got to take part. The council's going to do its bit, residents have to do their bit. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers? No. Councillor Morse. As you moved the original.
Yes, I do welcome their amendment as a friendly emotion. You should have asked me, I think, but don't worry. In summing up, I'm surprised that legislation regarding the fitting of sprinkler systems into older high-rise has not kept up with events. The warning signals were clear in 2009 at Lakenhall House and in 2010 at Shirley Towers. The fact that fire incidents occurred more frequently in high-rise flats clearly demands that we should move from static fire techniques to adding fire suppression techniques. Indeed, a quote, a spokesman from the Chief Fire Association, he said, "No one has ever died in the UK in a property where a sprinkler system has been correctly installed." Now, that won't last forever, but what we're seeking to do is actually go to higher standards. I mean, we're still losing 200 people from fires annually. And finally, the only reference I'm going to make to Grenfell. The men and women of the fire brigade who entered Grenfell House were highly trained and performed beyond our reasonable expectations. But they need us to protect them and residents by introducing sprinkler systems to contain excessive fires. And from a personal point of view, if I hadn't put this motion in, I wouldn't be happy with myself, because there's a lot of professional people that are protecting us, and I think it's up to us, the politicians, to actually support these people and make their job more successful. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Puddifoot.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm glad that we end the evening united on this. There's not a councillor in this chamber who isn't going in the same direction. I'm sure there's still lessons for us to learn and other councillors to learn, and we will learn things from the tragic events that have occurred. But I have given an undertaking that we will do whatever is necessary. If there are changes in the law and the recommendations, and I happen to agree with Councillor Morse, which is why we are getting ahead of the game, then we will do it as soon as practically possible. So I will leave it at that, and I'm delighted that as a chamber we can send the right message to our residents tonight.
Thank you. We will now take the vote on the amendment, please. All those for? Any against? Unanimous. The amendment is passed. Right, thank you everyone. That concludes our business for the evening, and I will now close the meeting. Thank you.